The night my father introduced me as just a nurse in front of 40 people, I was already sitting at the wrong table. Not wrong in the sense of a mistake. Wrong in the sense of a message. Table 9 near the coat room, close enough to the kitchen that I could hear the catering staff talking over the noise of the dishwasher. No centerpiece. A laminated name card in a plastic holder, the kind you'd find at a corporate lunch. My name printed in default font. Lena. Just Lena. No last name. I'd seen the seating chart 2 weeks before the party. My father had left it on the kitchen counter when I stopped by to drop off his birthday gift. I stood there for a long moment reading it. Table 1, my brother Owen and his wife. Table 1, senior partner Aldrich and his wife. Table 1, my father and my mother. Table 9, Lena and guest. I took a photo of it, put the gift on the counter, and drove home without going inside. The Hartley name has meant something in this city for 30 years. My father built that. He started as a junior associate at a 3-person firm in a building that no longer exists, passed the bar on his second attempt, made partner at 34, and built Hartley & Associates into a 14-attorney firm with a floor of a glass building downtown and a client list that gets you invited to the right dinners. His office has a wall of photographs. Him at his first partnership announcement. My brother Owen at his law school graduation, both my parents flanking him, everyone beaming. My mother at the Women's Bar Association Gala accepting an award for mentorship. I'm not on that wall. Not because I didn't accomplish things, because at 22, when I told my family I wanted to study nursing instead of law, the room went very quiet in a way that it never fully recovered from. My mother set down her glass and looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. Owen looked at me with the specific expression of someone watching a car slide toward a ditch in slow motion and choosing not to intervene. My mother's response came 3 days later, in the form of a question asked while she was unloading the dishwasher. She didn't look up. What do we tell the Aldriches? The Aldriches were family friends. A judge and a corporate attorney. Obviously. My father's version was quieter and longer lasting. He started referring to my career as Lena's detour, like I had taken a wrong turn and was simply waiting to find my way back to the correct road. He never stopped using that word. 8 years later, it had become the family's preferred shorthand for explaining me away at dinner parties. I work as a registered nurse in a surgical ICU. I make $63,000 a year. I monitor patients on ventilators and arterial lines. I watch people come back from surgeries they weren't sure they'd survive, and I'm the first face they see when they do. I hold hands during the part that nobody talks about, the part between the surgery and the certainty, when the body is deciding which direction it wants to go. I have learned to read a face that cannot speak. I have learned what it sounds like when someone's breathing changes in the middle of the night in a way that means something is wrong before any monitor goes off. I have stood in a hallway after a 12-hour shift and cried in the car because I couldn't bring someone back, and I didn't want my coworkers to see it. My father calls it bedside work. He says it the way you'd say someone is good with their hands. Not unkind exactly, just precisely, deliberately small. The moment I stopped hoping for anything different came about a year ago. Our unit was recognized by the State Nursing Excellence Board, given the Critical Care Innovation Award, presented once a year to a single ICU in the state. I had spent 4 months leading the protocol redesign they cited. I sent the ceremony information to my family in a group text 3 weeks in advance. My father responded the next morning. He had a deposition. I understood how these things went, didn't I? 2 days after the ceremony, he was photographed at a bar association gala. Owen was with him. They were laughing at something. My father's hand on my brother's shoulder, the kind of photo where you can tell the pride is genuine because it's not performed. I kept my award plaque on my kitchen counter for 6 weeks. At some point, I stopped seeing it as an award and started seeing it as a reminder of a very specific kind of loneliness. So when people ask why I never talked much about Jonah to my family, why I kept him entirely separate from that world, the simplest answer is that they never asked. They knew I was seeing someone. My mother's complete investigation, delivered over the phone in October, lasted 4 sentences. Was he in healthcare? No. Did he have a career? He owns a repair shop. A pause that carried the weight of a concluded verdict. Well, I hope he's reliable. That was it. 14 months of my life assessed in 4 sentences and a shrug. Jonah Baxter owns an automotive repair shop in a working-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. It's been in his family for 2 generations. He opens at 7, knows every vehicle by name and history, keeps a handwritten log of every repair job going back 11 years. He drives a truck that has a dent in the passenger side door that he keeps saying he'll fix and never does. He makes his own coffee every morning at 5:30 and drinks it on the step outside his shop while it's still quiet. When I met him, I was at the shop because my car was making a sound I couldn't identify and my regular mechanic was booked for 3 weeks. Someone at work recommended Jonah's place. He came out from under a vehicle, wiped his hands on a rag, and asked me to describe what I was hearing. I gave him a terrible, deeply non-technical description involving the phrase, kind of a grumbling whir. He didn't laugh. He went outside, asked me to drive it around the block, listened, came back, told me what it was, told me how long I had before it became urgent, and quoted me a price that was $30 less than I expected. When I picked up the car, he asked what I did for work. I told him. He asked what the hardest part was, not the most stressful, not the best perk. What was the hardest part? I told him about a patient I had that week, a 59-year-old man who'd come through a cardiac surgery and was doing well by every clinical measure, but who cried every night around 2 in the morning, quietly, because he was scared and didn't want his family to see it. I told Jonah that I had started staying an extra few minutes at the end of those nights, not doing anything medical, just sitting in the chair by the window so he didn't have to be alone in it. Jonah was quiet for a second. Then he said, "That's the whole job, right there." He was not, however, simply what he appeared to be. I noticed small things over time. A phone call he took outside the shop, speaking in the measured tone of someone who runs more than one meeting a week. A manila folder on his kitchen counter, thick, with the state agency letterhead visible at the top. A conversation he had in passing with the city councilwoman at a farmer's market we'd stopped at, familiar and easy in a way that felt practiced. When I asked about the folder once, he said it was related to a grant he'd applied for a few years ago. Old paperwork, nothing interesting. I let it go. Partly because I trusted him. Partly because whatever it was didn't change the thing that mattered, which was that he paid attention, not to my credentials, to me. My brother Owen's firm anniversary party was held at the Glenmore, a restored historic hotel in the Arts District with a private event floor and the kind of lighting that makes everyone look like they've been touched up. My parents had helped plan it. 40 guests, cocktail hour, seated dinner, remarks from senior partners, the kind of event where the wine list is a statement. Owen was being named equity partner. It was a genuine achievement, and I want to be precise about that. He worked for it. I was not resentful of the celebration. I was resentful of what I already knew was coming, which was the way I was going to be placed inside it. Jonah and I arrived on time. He wore a navy jacket over a white shirt, no tie. I wore a dark green dress I'd chosen myself, not the ivory shift my mother had sent to my apartment with a handwritten note suggesting it was more appropriate for the setting. My parents met us at the entrance. My mother's smile adjusted almost imperceptibly when she saw the dress. My father shook Jonah's hand with the single, efficient nod you give someone you've already categorized. I found out about Table 9 the same way I found out about everything in that family. By accident. I had stopped by my parents' house to return a casserole dish and heard my mother in the study, door half open, on the phone with the event coordinator. Her voice was efficient and pleasant. Lena and her guest at Table 9, near the coat room. Standard place settings are fine. They won't be part of the partner introduction sequence. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, not because I was shocked. I had stopped being shocked years ago. What stopped me was the specific clarity of hearing it stated out loud in her event coordinator voice. Practical and unemotional. They won't be part of the partner introduction sequence. It removed the last possible ambiguity. This was not carelessness. It was a considered decision, made and communicated as simply as a catering note. I told Jonah that night. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked if I wanted to skip it. I thought about it seriously. I sat with it for probably 2 minutes of real silence. No, I said. I need to go? Not to prove anything. I just need to see it clearly one more time and then I'm done with trying. He was quiet. Then he said, I'll be there. Table 9 was exactly as described, near the coat room, standard white place settings. Laminated cards, tables 1 to 5 had engraved cards with a small sprig of rosemary tied with twine, elegant and clearly intentional. My father sat at table 1, beside senior partner Aldrich and his wife, and beside Gerald Foss, the president of the State Bar Association, who was the evening's most distinguished guest. Gerald Foss was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the easy authority of someone who had spent decades being the most important person in rooms. He glanced around the floor twice in the first 15 minutes. The second time, his gaze passed over table 9 and kept moving. The third time, it stopped. I watched it happen. The slight stillness that comes over a face when the brain catches up to what the eyes are seeing. He looked at Jonah for a moment longer than everything else in the room. My father's remarks came during the second course. He stood with his glass and did what he had always done well. He made people feel honored to be listening. He spoke about Owen with the specific, textured pride of someone who had been paying close attention for 30 years. He talked about the firm, about legacy, about what it meant to build something that outlasted the person who started it. The room was warm and attentive. Then his gaze moved to me briefly, with the practiced ease of someone executing a long-established routine. My daughter, Lena, he said in a tone that was fond and dismissive in the same breath, chose a different path. Nursing. A small, calibrated pause. Hands-on work. I'm sure it's very meaningful. He let the sentence finish itself. Then, with a smile that didn't waver, and she's brought along her partner who runs a garage, if I have it right. A quiet ripple of polite amusement moved through the room. His eyes landed on me. Still getting your hands dirty out there, Lena? 40 people turned toward table 9. I did not answer. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. Slowly, I set it down. Jonah pushed back his chair and stood. The room noticed it the way a room notices a shift in weather. Not loudly. Just a change in pressure. Gerald Foss rose from table 1 at almost the same moment. He crossed the floor unhurriedly and the whole room watched him do it. Watched the most decorated guest of the evening walk toward table 9 with an expression that made my father's smile go very, very still. Jonah, Gerald said, stopping at our table. His voice was conversational, but the room had gone quiet enough that it carried. I thought that was you. I almost didn't recognize you out of context. He looked at me with a warm, curious expression, then at my parents' table. My father had risen from his chair. He had the look of someone recalibrating in real time. Gerald, my father said carefully. You know him? Gerald Foss looked at my father with the kind of patience that isn't particularly patient. Warren, he said. This is Jonah Baxter. His family shop has been the official vehicle maintenance contractor for the State Bar's regional office fleet for 6 years. 43 vehicles. Perfect service record. He let that land for a moment, but more to the point. Jonah's been funding the Baxter Trade Scholarship for the past 4 years, 62 recipients so far. Vocational training, certification fees, first-year tool stipends. Kids who couldn't afford the entry costs for skilled trades. His shop absorbed the administrative overhead entirely, so the donations went directly to recipients. He glanced at Jonah with the expression of someone who'd had this conversation before and still found it slightly exasperating. I've been trying to get him on the Bar Foundation's Workforce Development Advisory Panel for 2 years. He keeps declining because he says he doesn't do conference rooms. He looked at me then, and something shifted in his expression. He also, Gerald said, specifically requested that one of this year's scholarship recipients be placed in a hospital facilities apprenticeship program. A pause. At the same hospital where your ICU is, if I have it right. I hadn't known that. I looked at Jonah. He didn't look back at me right away. He was looking at my father, who had opened his mouth and found that there was nothing to come out of it. Jonah addressed the room without raising his voice or adjusting his posture. I didn't come tonight to make anything complicated, he said. I came because Lena asked me to, and because she's the most capable person I know who has also spent years being treated like a liability by the people who were supposed to be in her corner. He looked at my father directly. You've had 14 months. You never asked my last name. You never asked what she'd accomplished. You just decided a long time ago what she was worth measuring and you stopped looking. He sat back down. The room was completely silent. I stood up. My voice was steady. I had not planned what I was going to say, and that turned out to be the right choice. You've been doing this for 8 years, I said to my parents. Not loud, not angry, exactly. Just very, very finished. Not always with words, sometimes just with a seating chart, sometimes with the pause before you said my name, like you were deciding whether it was worth the breath, sometimes with the way you'd summarize an entire year of my work in one sentence and then spend 20 minutes talking about Owens. I know you love me. I'm not disputing that. But love and respect are not the same thing, and I've had one without the other for a very long time. My mother was looking at the table. I'm not performing anything tonight, I said. I'm just done rearranging myself to fit into the space you left for me. I looked at Jonah. He was already standing. We left. 40 people watched us walk to the elevator. The doors closed. Neither of us said anything until we were outside. The call from Owen came 4 days later. He sounded like himself but stripped of the practiced confidence, just his actual voice, which I had not heard in a long time. He said Gerald Foss had pulled my father aside after the party and had a conversation that Owen described carefully as significant. 2 clients had called the firm within the week. One cited concerns about judgment. The other didn't give a specific reason but requested a transfer to a different partner. The combined impact, Owen said, without specifying numbers, was not minor. My mother had received a message from the Women's Bar Association. She had been scheduled to moderate a panel on work-life balance in the legal profession. The invitation had been quietly withdrawn. Owen was the one who surprised me. He said, I knew what they were doing to you, for years. I told myself it wasn't my business and that I was staying out of it. But I was staying out of it because it was easier for me, not because it was right. And I've been sitting with that for 4 days, and I don't feel good about it. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked him what he wanted from me. He said he didn't want anything. He just wanted me to know that he was sorry. I believed him. My mother called 3 days after that. Her voice was careful in the way that voices get when someone is choosing each word in real time. She asked if I would come to the house. I told her I would, but that I needed to tell her first what it would take. I said I needed them to acknowledge, specifically and without qualifications, what the last 8 years had looked like from where I was standing. I said I needed 8 sessions of family therapy, 1 per week, beginning with a session in which I spoke for as long as I needed to, without being redirected or minimized. There was a silence. Then my mother said, I know I can't say both things are equally true, but I want you to know that your father and I have been talking every day since that night. And I think we finally understand what we've been doing. I don't think we did it to hurt you. I think we did it because we didn't know how to be proud of something we didn't understand. And I'm not sure that's better. That honesty cost her something. I heard it in how she said it, and I did not take it lightly. I told her yes. The first session was in a beige office with too many plants and a therapist who asked my father to describe my job in his own words. He struggled. That was its own kind of information. This session was hard in the specific way that honest things are hard. Not because anyone was cruel, but because we were all sitting inside the truth of something that had been carefully papered over for a very long time, and the paper had finally come down. The sessions after were harder in different ways. Some of them moved something. Some of them we just sat through and endured together, which is maybe its own kind of progress. I don't know yet what we're going to be. I've stopped needing to know by a specific date. What I know is that I drove home from the 4th session and sat in my car outside my apartment for a few minutes before going inside. The feeling wasn't vindication. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something quieter than both of those. A specific, unfamiliar lightness. Like a window I had forgotten was painted shut, had finally been opened, and the air coming in was just air. Ordinary, Unremarkable, sufficient. Jonah was on the couch reading when I got in. He looked up. I sat down next to him and didn't say anything for a minute. Then I said, "I think it's going to be okay. Not fixed, but okay." He nodded like that was the exact answer he'd been waiting to hear and went back to his page. Owen and I have been getting coffee on the first Saturday of the month. It's new and slightly awkward, and we're both pretending it isn't, which is maybe the most honest thing we've done around each other in years. He told me last month that he'd started questioning some things about how he'd built his own career, whether some of the choices had been his or just the path of least resistance through our father's expectations. I didn't have an answer for him, but I think the asking is the right direction. There's something I keep coming back to. My family measured Jonah against a scale they understood: credentials, pedigree, stated achievements. He didn't register on that scale. He was running a repair shop, funding a scholarship program entirely out of his own pocket, and doing the quiet, unglamorous work of maintaining things that other people depended on without needing anyone to know about it. The most important guest at that party had been trying to recognize his work for 2 years. My father had spent 14 months not knowing his last name. I think about all the energy I spent across those 8 years trying to make my work visible to people who had already decided what it was worth. All the award letters and ceremony invitations and carefully worded texts. All the times I tried to translate what I did into a language that would register. I was fluent in their language. They never tried to learn mine. I've stopped trying to translate. Here's the thing about the patients in my unit. Most of them don't know my last name either. They don't know my publications or my credentials or where I went to school. What they know is whether I came when they called, whether I was honest with them when the news was hard, whether I stayed. That's the whole job right there. Jonah said that on the day I met him, he didn't know then how long I'd been waiting for someone to say it. So let me ask you something. Is there someone in your life whose work you've made smaller because it didn't come in a form you recognized? Is there a person you've summarized in a sentence and moved on from without wondering what the full version of their story actually was? I spent 8 years waiting for my family to ask the right questions. I'm glad I stopped waiting. I'm glad I walked out of that party. I'm glad I found someone who listened to the whole answer instead of just waiting for the part that confirmed what he already thought. But I also know that I'm still capable of doing exactly what my parents did, just with a different set of assumptions. I caught myself once, about 6 months ago, making a quiet judgment about a coworker based on where she went to school. It was fast and internal, and I closed it off, but it was there. The difference is that I noticed it now, and noticing is where it starts. I've been thinking about what actually happened that night at the Glenmore, not the dramatic version, not the part where Gerald Foss crossed the floor and my father's smile stopped working. The quieter thing underneath it. My father is not a cruel man. I want to be honest about that. He built something real. He worked for it. He loves his children in the way that people love things they've invested in, which is deeply but also conditionally, and the condition was always that we reflect the shape of what he built. Owen fit that shape. I didn't. And for 8 years, neither of us talked about what that actually cost. The thing about being dismissed by someone who loves you is that you spend a long time trying to earn your way back into their estimation. You send the invitations. You keep the award letter on the counter. You bring your partner to the party even when you already know what table you've been assigned. You keep translating yourself into a language they're willing to hear. And the translating takes everything. It takes the energy you should be spending on the work itself, on the patients, on the people who actually see you. I gave 8 years of that energy to a room that had already made up its mind. What changed wasn't the party. The party was just the moment when the thing that had always been true became impossible to ignore. What actually changed was the decision I made 3 weeks before it, standing in my parents' hallway listening to my mother's voice through a half-open door, choosing not to walk away quietly for the 8th year in a row. Jonah didn't save me that night. I want to be clear about that too. Because the easy version of this story is that the right person came along and the right person was impressive enough to change my family's mind, and that's what made things better. That's not what happened. What happened is that I had already decided I was done before I ever walked into that room. Jonah just showed up the way he always shows up, steady and unhurried, and stood next to me while I said the thing I'd been carrying for most of my adult life. The consequences that followed, the clients, the withdrawn invitation. Owen sitting with his own discomfort for 4 days before he called. Those weren't punishments handed down from somewhere outside the situation. They were just the natural result of choices that had been made over a long time, finally becoming visible to the people who'd been insulated from them. My father had spent 14 months not asking a single question about the man his daughter loved. Gerald Foss had spent 2 years trying to recognize that same man's work. Those two facts, placed side by side in a room full of 40 people, did what the truth tends to do when it finally has enough space. It settled. What I carry forward isn't the victory of it. It's the smaller, harder thing that came after, sitting in a beige office with too many plants, watching my father struggle to describe my job in his own words, and understanding that his ignorance wasn't malice. It was just a failure of curiosity that had been allowed to calcify for 30 years. That doesn't excuse it. But it does explain it. An explanation is where repair has to start. I'm still learning to stop translating. Some days I catch myself reaching for the old habit, constructing the version of my work that will land correctly in someone else's framework. I close it off faster now. The patients in my unit don't need me to be legible to my father. They need me to show up, pay attention, and stay. That's the whole job. It always was.